In the next 4 years, we shall continue with the work to transform the sector, keeping in mind our high population growth rate, financial challenges, and security issues.
Nigeria's progress unstoppable, says President Buhari as academics came calling.
For those that have been confirmed by the Senate, the message is they must be prepared to work with the Senate and indeed the National Assembly.
Done and dusted, Senate screens 43 ministerial nominees proceed for recess.
President Buhari opens his defense before the presidential election petition.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we discuss Nigeria's forests and its management.
Nigeria is a country blessed with rich natural resources that are the envy of the world. Among these endowments are the rich forests that stretch thousands of square miles.
Of course, Kiran, you said something, the envy of the world. That's, of course, if you know that in the past, Nigeria's forests also played very critical roles, of course, in, gearing up our, foreign reserves earning, which was a major contributor.
Exactly. Okay, now it is quite true that Nigeria has a land area of about 99.3 million hectares, of which about 10% are estimated as forests that are rich ecosystems that remain a blessing to the nation.
All right, now the Nigerian forest, that's according to experts, is made up of over 500 species of trees. Now, that attain a height of between 12 to 60 centimeters. Now, that's quite high.
Exactly. Now, the ecosystems contain many valuable plant species, which have a great value for food, shelter, drugs, and fibers, which many say are underutilized and have not been properly harnessed.
Indeed, Kiran, it's a sad development because, of course, there is evidence that there are as many as 6,000 species of non-timber forest products, of course, that the country has not been able to properly manage. And if it does do so, it will give Nigeria a lot of economic and environmental value.
Well, that is where the problem lies about Nigeria's forests. Who is really in charge? The situation where forest resources are either exploited without proper accountability or value addition is a growing concern. And in fact, some say the collaboration to misuse Nigeria's forest endowment has an international dimension. Now, think about this. The Sambisa forest, for instance, has been in the news for negative than positive reasons because of the Boko Haram insurgency. So many other forests around the country are no-go areas as they have virtually become home to kidnappers, ritualists, robbers, bandits, and other criminals.
You talk about the northern fringes. If you also go, Kiran, to the southern, or south part of the country, you also have quite extensive forests, that are not properly manned. And the same thing is in the southwestern and southeastern part of the country. We have forest belts, of course, that have been, threatened and or misused by some criminal elements. So the question today will be, who is in charge of Nigeria's extensive forest belt? And is the country deriving the necessary benefits? Is there a master plan of replacing forests that are said to be depleting? And we'll also ask what will be the progress report of afforestation programs, different afforestation programs of government. So
yes, and we have such in the past. Well, these are serious questions we shall raise with our guests this morning. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. It's always good to have you join us as we broadcast live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Claire Delabu Abdul Razak. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And we're live here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. Okay, we will have the complimentary part of the program, and they will be including newspaper review by will be joining us in a short while. We'll also look at what business news is trending, and sports, foreign, arts and entertainment will surely be part of our program's package this morning. In the meantime, Chimobi Walter Naji is in our newsroom and ready for the morning news. Chimobi.
Hello, Claire. It's good to see you this morning, and I wish you a wonderful marriage anniversary. Hello, Kiran. Good morning. All right. President Muhammadu Buhari says the overwhelming victory recorded by the governing APC in the last election was a clear statement of resolve by Nigerians not to return to the dark days of impunity and corruption, receiving in audience a delegation of progressives in academics on a solidarity visit. The president reassured them that their trust and confidence will neither be taken for granted nor be in vain.
Next 4 years, we shall continue with the work to transform the sector, keeping in mind our high population growth rate, financial challenges, and security issues, especially in those conflict-affected areas. Simply put, our progressive agenda can only be sustained if we have an educated and skilled society. Therefore, we have no choice but to produce more engineers, technicians, doctors, nurses, and teachers.
Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed the conviction that if the late MKO Abiola had been allowed to govern Nigeria, the unfortunate religious and tribal issues now besetting the country could have been prevented. Now, the president was speaking when elders and leaders of thought from Ogun State paid him a visit.
Mr. President, you have done us a great honor. Mr. President, you have demonstrated in unambiguous terms that you are a true Democrat. Let me once again reassure you that the government and the good people of Ogun State will continue to collaborate, support, and cooperate with your administration at the federal level to ensure that the dividends of democracy and benefits of good governance get to the generality of the people of Nigeria. We are committed to giving priority to the people as focus of our administration. We will rekindle the hope of the people and reawaken their belief in their government. That is the best memorial we could ever give MKO.
If Abiola has survived and became the leader of this country, the religious and the tribal politics of Nigeria wouldn't have been as strong as it eventually became, because this Muslim ticket and majority-minority tribe, you know, because of his personality and I think commitment, he crushed it. If he was allowed to survive, we would have gone over our worst problem in this country.
And now from the National Assembly, the Senate has confirmed the 43 ministerial nominees transmitted to it by President Muhammadu Buhari with a charge to give their best to the Nigerian project.
My career in the financial institution, both development and commercial, ran a space of about 17 years. The case of our roads is something very pathetic.
My pledge to Mr. President and Nigeria is that if I'm confirmed as a minister, I will redouble my effort in the service of my country to justify its confidence in me.
For those that have been confirmed by the Senate, the message is they must be prepared to work with the Senate and indeed the National Assembly. As we are prepared to work with the executive arm of government, they are the implementers of government programs and projects.
Let's now turn our attention to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, where President Muhammadu Buhari has opened his defense before the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal sitting in Abuja. The president, through his counsel, Wole Olanipeku, is defending his victory in the February 23, 2019 presidential election, as declared by the Independent National Electoral Commission. President Buhari is the second respondent in the petition, where the People's Democratic Party and its candidate, Atiku Abubakar, are challenging his victory in the presidential election. Wole Olanipeku, counsel to President Buhari, tendered several documents, including the certified true copy of his school leaving certificate from Katsina Provincial Secondary School in 1961. Though counsel to the petitioners, Levi Uzoku, objected to the admissibility of the documents, the five-man presidential election petition led by Justice Muhammad Garba admitted all the documents in evidence. Wole Olanipeku, counsel to the president, has commenced calling of witnesses with Major General Paul Tafa, who was enlisted alongside President Muhammadu Buhari in the Nigerian Army on April 16, 1962, as the first witness. And the APC National Chairman Adam Soshamole and Peter Obi were in the court at the time. Now, former ambassador and Nigeria's permanent representative at the United Nations, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, has advocated the use of dialogue as the only solution to resolving issues and matters around security and peaceful coexistence in the country. Professor Gambari gave the suggestion at the opening ceremony of a two-day roundtable discussion organized by the Abdulsalami Abubakar Institute for Peace and Sustainable Development Studies, held at the Maizube Farms, Niger State.
The elders, the citizens, the young ones, who have a stake in this country, let us come and discuss our experience and find a solution. Fighting in the newspapers or in the news, social media will not solve the problem.
We must find the things that unite us. We must build a national consensus around a set of values of progress, of peace, of unity, and of justice.
Nigeria is going through a trying period, and we the elders feel that we should, it's about time we sit together, appraise the situation, see the depth to which it has sunk, and see how we can bring things back on an even keel.
This is a good sign when members of the thinking elite meet.
Now, democracy will hold no meaning if it does not deliver on the dividends, with security serving as most critical. Now, these are the words of the Catholic Archbishop of Abuja Diocese, John Cardinal Onaikan, in a media briefing to mark his 50th anniversary as a Catholic priest.
Our nation's greatness will be judged by how we treat our poorest and weakest members.
And those are the stories we're tracking at this moment. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Karen just after the break. Do stay with us.
We want to buy Indomie noodles. 4 packs, please.
Yo.
This is not my Indomie. Please, sir, if it's not Indomie, don't call it Indomie.
Sir, the taste is the difference. The difference is in the taste. That's why my brothers, my mommy, my daddy, and I all enjoy our delicious, so very delicious Indomie noodles. The difference is the taste.
Taste is the difference.
Yes. Difference is in the taste. Nothing tastes like my Indomie.
Indomie Super Pack, now available at 85 Naira. Indomie noodles, tasty.
Relieve tooth sensitivity with Sensodyne Daily Care 40 milliliters for just 350 Naira only.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth.
Introducing new Always Cotton Soft. Its unique top sheet is as soft as cotton and gentle to your skin, offering you comfortable protection as you go about your day. New Always Cotton Soft, available in long and extra long for 250 naira only.
Mommy is ready to receive me a bundle of joy. Mommy is making my home cleaner and safer. So nice.
By Dettol.
Businesses. Now let's join Kunle Adeye for more.
The Comptroller General of Customs, Amid Ali, said that there should be no cause for alarm now that many goods will come into the country following Nigeria's signing of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which will allow free movement of people and goods within the continent.
We know exactly what it is. We know the role we are supposed to play, and that is what we're going to play. We are ours to ensure that our borders, our country is not inundated by all sorts of goods. Customs' responsibility is to ensure that every good that is coming, that we enjoy that duty-free, designed by the protocol, must have originated from a member state.
In another development, an entrepreneur, Hadiza Usman, has implored youths who are yet to be engaged to embrace skills acquisition.
Basically, entrepreneurship is actually becoming like the order of the day. It's no more time for the youth and, for the general public to actually sit back and, at home and expect the government to provide jobs for each and every one of us. It is actually the set time for all of us to get busy with our hands.
And the equities market on Tuesday closed on a negative note as Nigeria's stock exchange or share index depreciated by 0.46% to close at 27,820.57 basis points as against 0.11% appreciation recorded previously. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeye.
All right, many thanks to you, Kunle, for the business, news. Bayo is already here with us. He's been giving me Bayo. We'll be right back after the newspaper sting. Stay with us.
Yes, as Claire said a short while ago, Bayo Atoyebi, our newspaper reviewer, is here with us. Bayo, good morning, and welcome to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kiri, and good morning. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Bayo.
Happy anniversary, by the way. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you.
What anniversary are you talking about?
20 years of marriage.
20 years of marriage.
Yes.
Well, she's just beginning.
Yes.
It's good. It's good.
20 years
well, you've tried anyway.
Anyway, I'm happy I'm not among those that will be seeking to get renewed licenses.
Yes.
Because the FD has come out with ways,
So you don't have to regularize.
So I don't have to regularize. All right, thank you, both of you.
Yeah, we have about 5 newspapers to review this morning, and Claire, you'd like to start?
All right, let's start with, I'd like to start with the Punch, and it has a headline, government ban, Shiites blame Saudi Arabia, and IG orders clamp down. Now, the rider says, FG Gazette's court order proscribing sect. And I'm sure that this story runs through all the papers we have, but they come in different captions and different headlines. You can read up the details of that on pages 2 and 10. Shiites blame Saudi Arabia, beg your pardon. IG orders clamp down, and FG Gazette's court order proscribing sects. Now, the picture story on the front page of the Punch, it's a very sad one. There you see a section of the Abule Osho Road off Giwa Lambe Road. That's Ifo local government area of Ogun State. It's a house that's almost caving in. Of course, that's due to erosion. It's the picture tells the story there. Other stories trending at the bottom of the paper. Ndume Amosun, Namani Melaye. Others head Senate committees. Details of that on page 9. And the sad story, baby dies as Lagos bus crushes mother. Details of that on pages 4 and 5. 9 killed in Taraba government hometown attack. Details of that on page 12. I'll leave the story just beside the nameplate. I'll leave that. I'm sure it's a headline story in one of the papers. Kieran.
All right, now let's go to the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust, below the nameplate, we have a Senate confirms all ministerial nominees, names committee held. It's on pages 8 and 10 of the Daily Trust. And I won't name my successor, Buhari says. Capture that on page 3. Now, the federal government raises a task force to recover 5 trillion APCON debts. Let's say asset management committee. Now, the lead story is on the shared group prescription. IGP on shared group prescription, that's the kicker. We will treat IMN members as terrorists, state enemies. Security experts, others to react as Onaeko faults federal government. Now, the picture story on the Daily Trust will interest you. These are number of young Nigerians between the ages of 20 and 28 who were paraded by EFCC operatives in Ibadan yesterday for suspected internet fraud style business. Well, of course, it's also trending across the globe. And then at the foot of the Daily Trust newspaper, we have a real Boko Haram defeated presidency in seats. It's on page 4. INEC disagrees as Situation Room says 2019 elections not credible. Page 13 is where you get the details of that. Now, equities lose 64 billion naira amid sell pressure. It's on page 16. Let's bring in Bayo now for some of the analysis.
Just before you tell us, talk to us about these stories, just to clarify the issue about the Zazaki's prescription. On the front page of the leadership, it says Zazaki's followers will be treated as terrorists. That's police. But the paragraph there says, henceforth, the Islamic movement in Nigeria, that is IMN, an arm of the Shiite Muslim community. An arm of the Shiite Muslim community.
Indeed, the government gazette is Gazette number 79. It's prescribing the Islamic movement of Nigeria in any part of the facts. Islamic movement of Nigeria, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki and his wife Zinat, will culpable homicide, disturbing public peace and illegal procession. Culpable homicide is not bailable, and for this he is being held. Consequently, his lawyers had brought up an appeal in court seeking him to be released for medical treatment on grounds of his being precariously in a poor state of health. These are the facts. But meanwhile, the police high command has declared that all protests and activities of Islamic movement in Nigeria, an arm of Shiite community led by Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, is illegal and therefore no longer allowed in any part of Nigeria. Therefore, their procession and protests are illegal. The Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, warned that any IMN member engaging in any illegal activity will be prosecuted under the Terrorism Act.
Now, if I may ask Bayo, what Onaeko pointed out could be argued in some quarters, because I also read some other persons on social media who are arguing that it is not all Shias that are members of IMN.
No.
So what was prescribed was IMN. But from the statement of Onaeko, it does seem as if, it looks as if all the Shias as a religious sect have been prescribed. But that is not the situation.
No, the order is clear. The Shia led by Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki.
His own sect, or his own group, because the other Shias who are not IMN members are still free, to, of course, be part of the Shia community in Nigeria.
In fact, there's a presidency statement that said that Shiites are not prescribed from holding their 5 daily prayers, and they are free to even go on pilgrimage. Those that have been prescribed are the Shiite followers of Ibrahim El Zakzaki.
Known as IMN.
IMN, yes.
Okay.
That was the reason I had to read out that first part, so that you know that, look, it's not all followers. It's an arm, that is known as the IMN that has been proscribed. Okay, but Bayo, there's also the story. I said earlier on that it was a headline story. Kieran read it. I won't endorse a successor. That's the PMB, President Muhammadu Buhari. It's on the front page of the leadership. It's a headline story. And of course, that's the interest of this paper. You understand? And the details of that are on page 6. And I was going through the details, and very funny, interesting portion the president said. This paper quotes Mr. President as saying, to me, this is very funny. I think if I identify anybody, I create more problems for him or for her. So, again, I'd rather keep my mouth shut.
Yes, actually it was a group visiting the president. They called themselves Progressive in Academic. While they were visiting that, the president indicated that he is not going to name any successor because it is going to constitute a problem for even the current administration. And he was categorical. Let anybody who wants to be president work for it. And he cited his own background of having contested 3 times before he succeeded at the 4th time. So whoever wants to be president must work for it. Yes. Meanwhile, the Senate has concluded the screening of 43 ministerial nominees yesterday. At the end of the screening, the Senate confirmed all the 43 one by one. This is a positive indication of the multi-partisan cooperation, quite contrary to what happened in the 8th Senate. Meanwhile, there are indications that the list of the confirmed ministerial nominees may have reached the presidency yesterday, and some people are speculating that there's likelihood that portfolios will be allocated today if the Federal Executive Council is convened. Meanwhile, the president also says that Liz Mashood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola had been allowed to rule Nigeria, these challenges we are having about religious and tribal issues, probably that is besetting our nation now, will have been a thing of the past. President was receiving a delegation from Ogun State led by the governor that came to thank him for honoring the late MKO Ewo Abiola. He said, the president said, he used his resources and energy to convince Nigeria that all we wanted was a solid Nigeria. The delegation was grateful to the president for honoring him with the GCFR and also naming the Abuja National Stadium after
his name. And then let's go to Nigerian Pilot. Let's take another newspaper. Nigerian Pilot newspaper. Below the nameplate to have a protest rocks Kaduna over plan to sack 20,000 workers. That's on page 9. Abuja native threatened Buhari and Oshibajo. They have a writer to that story. Say petition Senate over exclusion from ministerial list. It's on pages 8 and 10. Now the lead story on the Nigerian Pilot. Senate confirms 43 ministerial nominees, gives matching order. 2 riders to that. They must appear for oversight. Budget summons, says Lawan. Announces leadership of 69 standing committees. The story is also on page 8. Now, below the photograph for the photo story on the Nigerian Pilot, we have, we read that earlier on, IGP formally declares IMN proscribed as a terrorist group as well. Then there are stories trending the foot of the Nigerian Pilot. Like reps, Senate gives Obaseki 1-week ultimatum for fresh proclamation. It's on page 7. Supreme Court sacks APC rep member over forgery. That's on page 6. NNPC to pay $600 million debt to federal government before 2020, says GMD. It's on page 33. And I will provide all your needs, Buhari tells Fire Service. As Fire Service needs about 9.2 billion naira for more equipment. Bauchi gets 600 million naira USAID support for education.
Right. Yes, just before you, there about 2-3 stories from the leadership. The first one, just a little below the nameplate. It says federal government sets up task force to recover 5 trillion naira AMCON debt. 5 trillion naira AMCON debt. Of course, that's the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, owed it by some Nigerians and corporate bodies. And just below the picture story, you have jubilation in Kogi as Governor Bello clears salary arrears. Details of that is on page 8. And then the trending stories at the bottom. British Prime Minister appoints 39-year-old Nigerian as minister. Again, British Prime Minister appoints 39-year-old Nigerian as minister. Now, NAS Edo government set for showdown over assembly inauguration. And the last one there, Peace Institute asks FG on recruitment of security personnel. These stories are trending on pages 37, 4, and 6. Bayo, let's take the Prime Minister appointing a 39-year-old Nigerian.
Well, it's not the first. There are several Nigerians who have been living in the United Kingdom that have been elected to be members of parliament. And it goes to tell you that Nigerians, wherever they are like cream that will always rise to the top. And that is an encouragement for us.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely. And we're proud of the new, of course, minister.
Yes. We're talking about AMCON. The challenge for AMCON now is that agencies and individuals are owing it 5 trillion. Consequently, the Vice President has announced a committee that is comprises of a task force that is comprised of AMCON, EFCC, NFIU, and ICPC. And the chairman of AMCON, Moise Banire, has indicated that 67% of the 5 trillion naira being owed is just by 20 individuals and entities. Can you imagine 20 individual entities holding the nation to ransom with that quantum of debt? Now, the story about Edo State, the Senate has joined the House of Rep in giving the Edo State government 3 weeks to publish a fresh proclamation. After a week after the deadline for a proclamation that will be published in 2 newspapers, the Senate will have no option but to take over the Edo State House of Assembly. You will recall too that the House of Representatives had directed the Inspector General of Police and the Director of State Department Services to close the Edo State House of Assembly. They are citing Section 11 of 4 of the Constitution for their position, that is the National Assembly. However, the Edo State government has said that such a move is unconstitutional, and is saying that based on the same Constitution, Section 105, Section 3 of the 1999 Constitution, a proclamation has already been made, and the state governor cannot take instructions from the National Assembly.
In that connection, is there a concurrency, where the National Assembly will now take the upper hand with the way the Constitution is presented?
Well, the National Assembly is citing the Constitution for its action. The Edo State government is citing this Constitution, the same Constitution to back up its action, and has also indicated that there's already a court case, sub judice, that a restraint has been placed on the National Assembly and all agencies regarding this same issue. But let's see how that plays out. The third one is this human interest story. The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration has warned about eating a washed-up whale. That's very, very dangerous. A whale was washed onto the coast shoreline in Brass. And all shades of machines were brought in there. This sharp machine for falling timber was brought there. All shapes of axes, cutlasses, like he said in some languages, on the day of the death of an elephant, all shades of knives and dangerous weapons will come out. That's exactly what has happened. But NAFDAC is worrying that he has likened it to eating the meat of a dead cow you found on the street, because you don't know what actually occasioned the death, and that there can be some contaminants if you eat that meat.
But historically speaking, that has been happening over the years, and nobody ever died. One happened in Bayelsa, and it's been happening because if you ask elderly people from those communities, riverine communities, they will tell you that, look, it's historical. It has been happening over time, because you see, sometimes some of those whales die out of old age, right? It may not be poisoning, and we have no record of any person that has been killed based on that. It's not the first time, but the second time,
Well, NAFDAC is likening it to people going to a tanker that has fallen and scooping petrol is danger.
Very, very dangerous. And just to return to the issue of Edo, I of course, yesterday, the former governor of Imo State, who is now a senator, also raised the constitutional issue you spoke. So it's a constitutional matter, and only the courts, can, give its own valid interpretation, since both parties are giving their own interpretations to that.
Eventually, that's what the democracy is all about. When there is dispute, go to the court and you resolve it. Precisely. But they will have an explanation to give for inauguration that was held at 9:30 in the night, and like in Bauchi too, a proclamation was meant for 10 o'clock, but it was held very early in the morning, around 7 a.m. Okay, explain all those.
All right, let's go to the editorial for today. It's taken from the Punch newspaper. Page 15 of the Punch newspaper. Now, conclusion of Ajaokuta Steel project. In fact, it's a project that's been there over the years. And let me just take one paragraph before Bayo comes in. We are aware that many issues, including funding and disagreements between the government and the legislature, have largely contributed to the non-completion of the project.
Yes, the editorial is saying that presently it is said that as much as $652 million is required to complete it, an equivalent of about 200 billion naira to complete Ajaokuta. And the editorial is happening on the fact that we have had over the years that this structure is 95.7% complete. What is left is less than 2%, but that 2% has been causing a lot of problems. And the editorial says what is plaguing Ajaokuta is purely maladministration and change of technology politics. And incidentally, the same technology that is at Ajaokuta is being used by 2 leading steel development agencies around the world. Ukraine, and therefore, we have no excuse not to have Ajaokuta working, considering the potentials. And the editorial is saying that it holds the secret of potential for our industrialization, and government must do everything to ensure that it is revived. You may recall that the House of Representatives actually ruled and enjoined the federal government not to sell the Ajaokuta steel. Okay. The Senate went a step further and allocated funds from the excess crude account for it to be revived.
Okay, just before we go, I'd just like a picture story at the back page of the Punch. It speaks volume of the common saying that, of course, there's dignity in hard work. And by the way, person that is a physically challenged, disabled, you can see him, he's a cobbler. And I think this is the kind of spirit, you can see that.
Yes, there is ability in disability. And nowhere has it been demonstrated. One of the best athletes we have in this nation, our Paralympics athletes. Yes. They've won the best medals for this country.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. And this young man here is a businessman, as you can see him.
Yes.
Notwithstanding
his disability to become a constraint, and he has a means of livelihood.
All right,
he deserves to be encouraged.
All right, Bayo, we end it here for now, hoping that you will return again tomorrow for further analysis and newspaper review. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we thank you for staying with us up to this moment. We'll take a short break now, but when we return, we shall, of course, delve into issues concerning forestry and its management.
Protocol and event management are special skills which can only be acquired through training and experience. NTA TV College JOS is organizing a special 2-week course on protocol, event management, and public relations to upgrade the capacities of practitioners. The course will equip participants with modern skills, techniques, and international best practices in protocol, event management, and public relations. Also, a special 4-week intensive course on non-linear editing techniques will run concurrently. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of non-linear editing. Take advantage of this course to hone your professional skills for premium packaging of your programs and reports. The venue for both courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos, Plateau State. Date 19th to 30th August 2019 for the course on protocol, event management, and public relations. 19th August to 13th September 2019 for basic non-linear editing techniques. Course fee 100,000 naira only per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more information, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College JOS, training you to be the best you want to be.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
Are you aware that your perfect family may be under threat by germs? Germs can cause infectious diseases like diarrhea, typhoid, and flu. These infectious diseases are amongst the biggest killers of adults and children. In Nigeria, tens of thousands of children under the age of 5 have died due to diarrhea caused by germs, which could easily have been prevented. These illness-causing germs are everywhere. Dirty surfaces, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes, in unclean bathing water. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 capful. For surface cleaning, for first aid, for your laundry, in your bathing water, and to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Helen!
Hey, where's your mom?
Today is her toilet day.
What?
Helen! Toilet day? Tomorrow you're hosting a party and it's a matter of my reputation. Even if you spend your entire day cleaning with all this, it still won't be party ready. Impossible! Challenge? New Ticker Harpic 10X. Even if you use this solution 10 times, it won't give you the same cleaning like Harpic. Its new Ticker formulation sticks to the bowl better, removes old stains, and gives you a sparkling clean toilet. Wow! New Harpic 10X gives me the freedom from toilet day. New Harpic 10X for 10 times better cleaning.
Right. This is Good Morning Nigeria. If you've just joined in, we're glad to have you with us. Of course, we're broadcasting live on Africa's largest TV network, DNTA. Today, we're looking at how we're managing our very extensive forest belt. But before we take our guests, let's join Victor Azo with this background report.
Nigeria is arguably best known today for its oil deposits, but the country is home to a rich diversity of forests and wildlife. With a rich repertoire of plants, animals, streams, river tributaries, and waterfalls, the forests crisscross rural communities and towns. Indeed, Nigeria's forests cover about 96,043 square kilometers. That's about 10% of the country's landmass. However, the forests have been neglected for years. Experts are of the view that they are unmanned, unpoliced, underfunded, and poorly managed. In fact, the presence of authorities in these sanctuaries is said to be either non-existent or at best sporadic. The forestry policy is said to also adopt a top-to-bottom approach which disregards host communities has not helped matters. When these communities are alienated, they are less inclined to take ownership of the forests. This has led to forest areas being poorly managed, which in turn has led to them being exploited by criminals who pose a security threat. The forests have therefore become a hotbed of criminals and safe haven for bandits. Boko Haram's seizure and subsequent occupation of Sambisa forests, for instance, has been blamed on years of neglect and community apathy. By law, forests fall under the government's mandate, but the government has not been able to secure them, apparently because of their huge size, lack of personnel, and poor surveillance technology. Recently, governors of the Southeast Geopolitical Zone resolved to establish forest guards to tackle issues of insecurity in the zone and to clear up to 50 meters into bushes along roads in their localities to have clear views of roads ahead as strategy to combat insecurity. Will this strategy work and perhaps for the whole country? Or are there other strategies that may work better? These are some of the questions guests will be required to answer as discussions get underway shortly.
And now joining us in the studio to discuss the topic is Professor Shola Adepoju. He's the Director General of the Forestry Reserve Institute of Nigeria. Prof, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
And also here is Ibrahim Goni. He's a Conservator General, National Park Service. It's a pleasure to have you here this morning.
Thank you.
All right, and we also have with us here in the studio Engineer Lagboju Akeju. He's a familiar face with us. He was Director of Rural Development at the Ministry of Agriculture, but of course he's now a very strong reference group member of the Agricultural Policy Research in Africa. We'd like to thank you, Engineer Lagboju, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, yes.
We also have with us here Babatunde Akinola, who is a Director he's head of Frustration Land Management Department at the National Agency for the Great Green Wall.
Thank you.
We'd like to, and from Jos, if we have our guest from Jos, Dr. Victoria Joshua, who is, of course, the Provost of the Federal College of Forestry. We'd like to thank you, Dr. Joshua, for joining us from Jos.
Gentlemen and ladies, welcome once again to this edition of the program. Actually, we would like to begin from a definitive point of view. Let's look at the basic characteristics, of a forest. We hear there are certain classification of forests: tropical forest, temperate, boreal, plantation forest, and what have you. Now, what do we have in Nigeria? I'd like to begin with a man who is very, very close to to forests, and that's Ibrahim Goni. What do you make of the nature and kind of forests that exist in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Viewers, good morning. The Nigerian forest happens to fall in the tropical climate. And being a tropical type of climate, what we expect are the pronounced two seasons. That is the wet seasons and the dry season. And under that tropical type of forest, trees are not as tall as they are in the temperate forest. And animals also are such that most of the forest type in the tropics are more of savanna types of forests. There are rainforests, but the rainforests are not as massive or large as the savanna type of forest. So you expect to have animals that wallow or roam in the savanna type, like the antelopes, the elephants, the giraffe, that is in the arid part of it, and of course in the rainforest type you have the forest elephant, the forest buffalo, and the rest of them. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me, Kiran, let me go a little academic. That's why I'd like to bring in the professor to give us, let's have an understanding of what, because when we talk about forests, in our local parlance, we're talking about bush. That's the understanding. That's the layman's understanding. Mm-hmm. But give us an understanding of what we mean by forest. And then, is it a resource?
Thank you, viewers. Good morning, everyone. It's more than a resource. Everything about even our being starts from forest. I'm very sure if any of us had not been breathing oxygen, we won't be here this morning. So forest is a very complex resources And that's why we start by defining it as a nature that consists both the flora and the fauna. That's both the plant and the animals. And we also have what we call non-timber forest product, which is from where you get what most of us are wearing, either a shoe or our dresses, our makeup, and most things we use. But most time, there's this erroneous definition of forest. There's a difference between vegetation and forest. So when you say we have about 10% vegetation cover, it includes the grass, the straw, and the forest. But when we're actually talking about the forest cover of the country, as we stand today, we only have about 5 million square meters of forest cover, which is giving about 5 to 6% of the total land mass of Nigeria, as against the expectation or the expected 25%, which is the world standard. And that's why even the one we're having now, we must also find a way to commend this current administration, because before now, there has not been any special focus on how do we increase the forest. Until a year or two ago, under Debt Management Office arrangement and Green Bond, that has to now make a provision for us to make effort to see how we can be planting to add to what we have. But that's not to say what we have or had is constant, because it's been depleted on a daily basis because people have not found alternative use to it. But we're not saying forest should not be used. And that's where this word sustain management of the forest comes in.
Okay, we'll just keep you on hold.
Yes.
Not that. Sorry.
I think as we get on, we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the conversation where some of the issues you raised will be properly dissected. But at this moment, we're trying to see how we can let our viewers understand the concept of forest and what it is all about. And I'd like Dr. Olabaju Akeju to give us his own perspective of what the forest mean or should be or is.
Thank you very much, Ikria, and good morning, viewers. Yes, actually, the forest actually has been defined in the way my two colleagues have just stated. But if you look at it from the point of square root one, in a way that people can really understand what forest is all about, it's about large tract of land that is populated by densely trees, shrubs, and woodlands. And the FAO and UNEP also gave a step forward about what actually constitutes a forest. And that has to do with the percentage of trees that cover that land. Okay. It is estimated that it shouldn't be less than 10% of trees covering that land as forest. Also, we talked about the size of the trees within the forest. And for a place to be considered as forest, it also must meet what we call a minimum standard. And that has to be, most of the trees there must not be less than 5 meters. But in some thick forest, you could get trees that rise up to 25, 40 meters. Within the framework of this discussion also, I also want to actually draw out a distinction between what we call forest and jungle. Because there is a distinction between forest and jungle. And that's really borders on what we are really discussing now.
So what's the distinction between forest and jungle? Because we must know.
Yes, thank you very much. Jungle is also a forest, but it's a highly densely forest that has a coverage of very close to almost 70 or 80% of trees, almost impenetrable. And this is where all those criminal elements actually hide themselves. It's a very difficult terrain.
So how do you classify our forests?
So
let's say
a jungle,
yes,
all jungles are forests, but not all forests are jungles. I hope you understand the concept. All jungles are forests, but not all jungles, not all forests are jungles.
So again, how do you classify? Let's take, for instance, Sambisa Forest. Of course, everybody knows about Sambisa Forest. Let's take it as the other, forests around the different parts of the country. How do you classify them?
The Sambisa Forest is a combination of forest and jungles. And this is where those elements of criminals are actually hiding because of the difficult terrains within that area.
Okay, so it means that in a stretch, for instance, there could be some part that are jungles,
yes,
some
the forest,
in a particular belt.
Exactly.
Right. So before we come to you, Prof, let's also get Tunde Akinola to come in here in terms of definition, having understanding of basic meaning of a forest.
Thank you. Thank you. And good morning, the audience. Like what my predecessors have just said, this is science, and the definition doesn't change. And the only addition I just had is that, like you have said, we have the vegetation cover, and other vegetation we have the grassland, we have the shrubland, and we have the forest. And in most places, the percentage, like the last speaker has just said, the percentage of trees in the particular vegetation determines whether it is a grassland or shrubland or forest. It's talk about 10%, but some other literatures we also see about 30%. When you have a cover, the vegetation cover, that the percentage of the trees there is about 30%. You refer to it as a forest. And you have different types of trees, and you have a different type of forest. Like I talked about lowland forest, and we also have also some forest in the savanna region. And all this one will be determined by the type of species that are in those forests. Like the trees in the savanna forest, they are mainly drought resistant. Many of them are drought resistant because you are talking about the dry region. Whereas in the lowland or the high forest down in the south, some of them have thin bark because the moisture content in that area is very high. So,
okay, we'll come back to you. Let's also get the perspective of Dr. Victoria Joshua, who is the Provost, Federal College of Forestry. Dr. Joshua, I've had an interesting one here from of course, guests here in the studio, especially from Engineer Akeju. He's been able to distinguish between a jungle and a forest. So what's your perspective to this?
Discussion. The forest, we have high rainforest and we have savanna. Those are the major vegetational types. And these ones are scattered all over. And just like he said, they are mixed at various areas where they are found. The high forest has a lot of tall trees and has a canopy. But the savanna may not have the canopy, the tree canopy that the forest has. Some places are thickly, densely populated by trees. Some are sparsely populated by trees. The sparsely populated areas are the savanna, and they are majorly found in the northern part of the country, while the rainforest is found in the southern part of the country. Those ones have canopies, they have lianas, and they have tiers in those days. But now the tiers have been depleted, and just like my DG said, a lot of it has been seriously depleted and degraded.
All right, let's remain with you, Dr. Victoria Joshua. As the Provost of the Federal College of Forestry, you can lead us into the next level of this conversation, which is, of course, in the management of forests. Now, what are the indicators of sustainable forest management framework that perhaps are being used in other climes that could be used here? Because invariably, the actual sense that, what we're saying this morning is how we now
manage these forests. We have been able to define forests, and of course establish the fact that the nature of forests we have in Nigeria are beneficial when it comes to economic aspect of our lives. So what should be the management strategy for the kind of forests that we have in Nigeria?
Forests give us a lot of benefits. So there is need to manage the forest. And the forest provides a lot of goods and services to everybody. Everybody is interested in the forest. So there is need for sustainable management of the goods and services provided to ensure continuity of to ensure that we continue to enjoy the services. The forests help to protect the environment. The forests provide food, they provide medicine, they provide shelter, they help to control global warming, which is the menace bedeviling everybody now. So there is need for these forests to be managed. The basic word there is sustainable management. As we exploit, we regenerate. We should ensure that the regeneration is not overwhelmed by the exploitation. Unfortunately, exploitation is being overwhelmed by regeneration. So there is need for a lot of state presence in the forests. There is need for us to avail ourselves of aerial surveillance technologies, modern ones, whereby we can monitor the forest, both remotely and otherwise. There is need to be able to have specially trained forces. Since the forests have been invaded by criminal activities, there is need to have specially trained forces who will use modern technology, and they will be able to manage the forest both within the forest and out of the forest. So there is need for that. We have the laws, but they are not adhered to. So we need to look into how the policies on ground are practiced, or how we ensure that we enforce them, so that we can be able to regenerate or at least sustain the little we have, so that we don't lose everything.
All right, Dr. Joshua, thank you. We'll return to you presently. Let me get back to the Conservator General. Whether jungle, whether forest, what we're discussing here is how to manage the jungle and make it become a forest, and also how to properly manage a forest so that it doesn't revert, to the jungle status. In terms of resources, we've all identified that our forests, our jungles are resourced, potential revenue earners. Can you give us the extent of diversity in terms of resource deposits in our forests?
Thank you very much. The extent of diversity is so extensive, particularly in the tropical forest. And if I may quickly just chip in this. When we were defining forest, different definitions were given based on the vantage point of people. But you define forest can be defined in terms of administration, the legal aspect establishing it. Forest can be defined in terms of the land cover, that is the types of trees, which of course Doctor was referring to as jungle and the forest. Then forest can also be defined based on the land use type.
Okay.
So based on these definitions, the diversity of resources can be put to whatever use they are required. For example, the forest in Nigeria inhabits a lot of insects, trees, birds, animals, and of course, the soil itself is a resource, because the soil determines what the forest produces. And based on the diversity of the forest, you realize that the rainforests are the most diverse in terms of biodiversity. They are the most diverse. So, and the Cross River National Park, I'm from the National Park, which of course is the oldest rainforest in Africa and the largest in Nigeria. is described as a hot spot of biodiversity in Africa. That is to show you that the level of diversity we have in the rainforest of Cross River National Park.
We've looked at we have quite a number of forest reserves that have been managed for their resources. But let us look at those that have not been properly managed and look at the resource therein. You understand? Earlier on in our conversations, we said, look, these Nigerian forests, are a very veritable source of revenue, generation, and which we have yet to tap. So, Professor Adepoju, I'd like you to tell us in terms of potential benefits to national economy, how resourceful our forests, whether you call it forest. And by forest, we mean the large forests that we hear of, the ones in the South. I know there was once an Ivu forest in the South. There's the Sambisa forest. There's so many forests. So let's bear that in mind.
Thank you so much. And as everybody was talking, I was just thanking God for this opportunity and wants to plead with NTA that you give more time for us to really exhaust this discussion, because this is a major issue in the country, but has not been given the attention it really deserves. If you go back to the starting of forestry in the country, and that's why in the Forestry Society of Nigeria and National Park are twins that you cannot separate. Why we had it so good in the past was every state yearly send it that you request or not, minimum of 100 people to be trained, and to National Park to be tutored on how to manage the forest. So every state and local government in the past has their forest guard that they are annually trained. And if you go back to the history of Sambisa, you can't separate it from National Park. It was under them before. If you want to go into it, yeah. But if you even go to where we call Sambisa, is it really a forest? In the true definition of forest, is sparsely dense environment, it's crop field environment.
It was a reserve.
It was under National Park.
Yes.
Because it's at least what you can call forest in that neighborhood. But what happened? Probably you explain more about it. But you talk about reserve, forest reserve, as far back as 1902, it was even used to resolve crises between neighboring towns. If you go between Oyo State and Ogun State now, what we call Gambari Forest Reserve, was used to resolve the differences between the Ijebus and the Ibadans. And that land, in the wisdom of those who were leading us then, said the two parts should leave this place, and it was planted up. Now, how dense a forest becomes is a function of how much time is allowed without exploitation. Because the undergrowth will also become trees with time. And that defines whether it's called jungle or it's called forest. But in the true sense of it, no matter how jungle-like it looks like, it can be difficult for National Park Service to tell you the terrain, because that's what they are trained on. And I don't see any security setup in this country that can really tell you about anything about any forest like National Park. My job and any other agency is to establish forest. And there's a difference between forest and plantation. Plantation is the one we plant. It's when we leave that plantation to allow the undergrowth to grow, then it becomes an artificial forest. Then we have what we call street natural reserve that are naturally from creation forest. That's where you have the likes of Mbause Reserve, Mamu in the east, the Sherry Hill in Jos, and the Cross River is talking about. These are natural reserve. And that's why they're designated even in the world of Man and Biosphere as the hotspot, because the biodiversity index of Cross River cannot be found anywhere in Africa. But how much of those reserves are still standing? We have less than 25%, even when they are gazetted. So until we unbundle the Land Use Act, because by the time the Land Use Act came up on, most of the reserves were taken over by states. Because the law has said all the land belongs to the state. But if you go to Ogun State now, they have started what they call Ile Tuntun in partnership with the cement factory there.
Ile Tuntun is new land.
They want to regenerate the Meko axis, and they're working with us to help them regenerate that reserve. But all the reserve, about 1,167 of them, were all gazetted. And that means it belongs to federal government. But most of them are not accessible anymore. Some of them are state housing estates now. So the forest is the only resources some countries are living on.
And that's why I like our discussion to go to, because the reason for this topic this morning is to look at how Nigeria can efficiently utilize its forests and not allowing kidnappers, bandits, and all form of evildoers to occupy the area, because it is lucrative. You know, that's what they have been able to prove to us. It is lucrative, and we're now looking at what are the policies or the laws that are already in the Constitution that guide the protection and management of our forests, so that they will not be occupied by those dangerous men and women. Now, according to the UN, about 1.6 billion people, including more than 2,000 indigenous natives, you know, in all parts of the world, depend on forests for their livelihood. Okay. And some of them in Zamfara, Sokoto, and some other areas affected by this banditry have moved.
It's grossly misused. It is abused. It is also degraded. Take, for instance, most of the things that we use basically in life, they are all derived from forestry. We talked about newspaper prints. We talked about the lumber. And then you talked about the foods and fibers. And most of these fuels are also coming from the forestry. But like the doctor from Jos just said, the problem of management is the exploitation of the forest resources. So if we're able to balance the forest resource in such a way that it is not over-exploited, then we will reap the maximum benefit from forest. But let me also say it. Most of the time we often forget that forest is life. I wonder if there is no forest, we won't be alive. Because forests play a very, very prominent role in what we call this climate change and all those things. Actually, we use it as carbon sink. Because when you have this carbon dioxide out, it is the forest or the trees that will absorb it. And when you have this over-accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, what does it do? It traps in the heat. And these are the heat that are released into the heat. It is this heat that is released into the atmosphere that causes what we call the climate change.
How can it be managed? How can forests be managed? What should be the management structure or framework that could make it possible for government, whether national or subnational, you know, to manage our forests?
Good. Management of forests, you have to look at the purpose of what you want to use the forest. First and foremost, we need to look at some of those enabling laws that we have. Most of these laws are archaic. Take, for instance, the Wildlife Law of 1933. It's still archaic. It has not been reviewed. To actually address the concern of forestry, we're talking about forest that is being inhabited by all these criminal elements. Why is it so? It's because it is regarded as an ungoverned space. It appears as if it is no man's land. And as of today, the people that are actually protecting the forest are the forest guards. And they don't have enough manpower. So also the people, the wildlife officers.
Yes, we will get to that. We will know what is happening and why they have not been as effective as they used to. But let's bring in here Mr. Akinola. In the course of our research, I got to find out quite a number of forest reserves. Of course, the Kamuku National Park. There's of course the Falgore and the Gomo Forest Reserve. Sambisa Sama is also a forest reserve. So I'm wondering how and when did all of these forest reserves become jungles? What happened?
Thank you very much. One of the greatest challenges we have is this lack of awareness. Some people still believe today that trees, plants grow on their own, so there's no need for management. But if you don't manage these forest resources, they go into depletion, if not extinction. So there's a serious need for awareness for people to know that plant trees are very, very crucial because of so many benefits we are deriving from them. You talk about socio-economic importance of forest. Like the last producer, the last speaker has just spoken. The usefulness of forest to us as human beings can never be comprehensively discussed. Because if you talk about oxygen which we breathe in, which is very important, that without it, we cannot survive. What of the water that the forests are protecting? You can't drink, if you don't have water to drink, it's another challenge.
Is the problem, is the challenge a challenge of awareness and sensitization? Because these ones that I have called out have been already, they are gazetted. These are, reserves, that of course are in operation.
Exactly.
So I'm asking, how did we allow those reserves to become jungles where we now have, criminals, kidnappers, and all sorts of, people have now turned to their hideout? Okay, yes, you want to go.
Yes, you see, the problem with the management of our forests. In the first place, you have man and unmanned forest. Man forest is that is daily being monitored by man himself physically. The unmanned forest is that is being monitored by the deployment of technology using drones, light aircraft, helicopters, and the rest of them. Which, of course, Nigeria is yet to attain a reasonable level as far as unmanned forest monitoring is concerned. Okay. But for the man monitoring forest, Kamuku you have mentioned is a national park. Adjacent to Kamuku you have Koyambana and Zamfara State. Mm-hmm. Then on another side of Kamuku you have Alawa Game Reserve in Niger State. This banditry you are talking about is within this circle. And the rangers in Kamuku daily provide the military with information. In fact, the first time the military got there in Kamuku, to be able to access it, they had to dialogue with us. We gave them the size, we gave them the routes, we gave them the content of that place. But like one of my colleagues says,
Engineer Keju,
some of these forests are not, some of the forests like Kuembana, Alawa, and all these things, the management structures are weak because Nigeria has adopted 6 categories of protected area management. And under this category, we have the national park, we have the game reserve, you have the forest reserves.
Okay.
Under the forest reserve, you have the one on top of the table now, the Sambisa. Mm-hmm. Sambisa, of course, is a forest reserve. And the processes of creating national park is such that the state government has to indicate interest to the federal government. We have this property, we are ready to hand it over to you as a national park. The federal government now comes in and take it over. We started intervention in the case of Kamuku, in the case of Sambiza. As far back as 2003, we started intervening towards handing it over to the federal government as a national park. But since the Constitution said that forest reserve, game reserve are under concurrent list, it is only the national park that are on the exclusive.
Okay.
The federal government has no power. But for the management, we have forest guard, we have rangers who patrol every day. And this is why we are able to get information from what is happening in Kamuku.
Yeah, the guards and rangers. One of you talked about how equipped they are. What kind of training do they have? Can they really provide the services required of them, based, of course, on the length and the breadth of or the stretch of the forest we're talking about, whether jungle or forest. Jungle more difficult, because you have just said that for us to monitor the jungle, we have to apply some level of technology, which is true. At this point,
yes, I know. I'm from what he said. If we had, parks or guards in some of these game and forest reserves, how come they have now become, taken over, by bandits?
But these are
yes.
not where
Did
the
they go to sleep?
But these
Did
are
they
not
go
where
to
the
sleep?
bandits are. The bandits are right inside the thick forest, the jungle that you're talking about, which we believe are not penetrable. Right, that is where they are. That's why they can't be located. That's why he's also talking about Goni is talking about drones to be able to fish them out, because they're under the trees. I'd like us to go to Jos, please. When we come back, we'll return. We've had a little bit of a difficulty getting to her, but now we're clear to do that. Dr. Victoria Joshua, I'm asking this question because you are the provost of a college that is training Nigerians whose business is going to be on taking care of our forests. Now, this issue of technology, how will it play out to be able to see how thick forests or jungles are managed? In your curriculum, are you teaching the younger generation of Nigerians who are going to come out to be like Goni here with us on how the best international practice that could be applied when it comes to guarding our forests? Because as it is presently, most of our forests, apart from the areas that the national parks that are covered, some of them are unmanned, uncovered, and that is why they have been taken over by bandits and all manner of miscreants.
Thank you very much. As a training arm of the Institute, like I said, we train youths and staff of various Department of Forest staff on how to manage the forests. We train them silvicultural activities. We train them aerial survey. We have a lot of courses that address these issues, and we train them on it and release them to go and implement what they have been trained in. So we have the capacity to train them, though we also need to upgrade in some areas, and we are working towards that. But let me digress a little. The main thing there is implementation, or the good environment to be able to practice. They are trained, but these reserves have been taken over by anthropological activities, and most of them are being exploited. We don't have the capacity to stop the exploitation, either because of lack of awareness, and like you said, if the bandits have taken over, even the rangers and the forest guards that are being trained to work in these areas cannot confront such forces. So we need to upgrade, in our training. That's why I said it initially that we should look into evolving from forest guards into specially trained forces and equipped or armed to confront the bandits that are taking over the remnants of the teak forest, and then the forest reserves that are being depleted because of logging, fuelwood exploitation. If we can have the state to cooperate with us, we can have, forestry is everybody's a stakeholder in forestry, because we need forest to survive. We derive a lot of services from forest. So there is need for every hand to be on deck so that we approach it like there should be a critical mass of confronting the conservation of our forest reserves so that they will not be a shadow of what they ought to be. If we look into them, their sizes have reduced drastically. Development is taking over. The little that are remaining, you cannot stop people who derive livelihood from the forest from exploiting it. So we need to teach them how to exploit on a sustainable basis. The diplomats we train they are equipped, but they should have a good environment to practice what they have been trained in.
All right, Dr. Victoria Joshua, thank you. You've mentioned, of course, the training of forest guards and rangers. I was going to ask, who really is in charge? We've been able to say, okay, national parks, of course, under the exclusive list, and the others under concurrent list. So we have both the federal government and the sub-national governments, of course, having responsibilities. But Forestry Institute and, of course, your college will also want to know what role you're playing. If we have guards and rangers that have been trained, and we have our forest degenerating into jungles, where people have now turned into their hideouts, and we're having security issues as a result, instead of, exploring the potentials, the revenue potentials embedded in our forest. So, but we will take these questions when we come back. We have a number of tweets coming in, and we'd like to go on a short break. When we come back, we'll take those tweets.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. Not be only to connect lights. Come do on yourself now. Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician, who would they look for with this? Oh, Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer, because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Well, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We, of course, have been discussing the issue of forestry and how Nigerian forests can be managed and reserved for us to, of course, derive some benefit from that natural habitat. Many Nigerians are beginning to respond to this conversation and by way of tweets, and we have them here, Claire. The first one is from Sani Michael or Makuji. In advanced countries of the world, forests are exclusively reserved to serve as game reserve for tourists, but in our own society, forests serve as hideout for Boko Haram and kidnappers. This happens as a result of system failure, but we should do total cleansing of our forests.
All right, now I'll go tweets. Our forests have become, of recent, a threat to security. But the use of drone technology across all forests will help in proper monitoring against bandits and other criminal activities.
Now, from Law Alpha C, Nigeria has many thick forests, particularly at the northern part of the country, which produce safe havens for insurgents and allied criminal activities. It is known fact that many forests like the Sambisa have not been adequately ransacked by the security forces in Nigeria due to poor mobilization, and everybody knows that these terrorists and bandits are hiding and operating from there.
And Mike, I have got tweet. The importance of preserving our forests cannot be overstressed. He said, even though it was war against deforestation, but activities of gangsters have obliterated the narrative as our forests now serve as hub for their ungodly behavior. We must maintain security in our forests.
Now, from Festus Akimbo, it is sad that our forests have been taken over by kidnappers, ritual killers, armed robbers, terrorists, and other dangerous criminals. The activities of these criminals present serious threat to our national security and prosperity. Government must rescue all our forests from criminals.
And Chris Simeon tweets, it's a pity that Nigeria's forests, which is supposed to yield economic benefit, now serve as hideout for insurgents, terrorists, and other criminal activities.
Now, from Dele Jack Solomon, it is so sad and pitiful that our forest areas are used by terrorists, kidnappers, cannabis cultivators, cattle rustlers, and robbers, as they offer shelter and provide resources that can support militants. Now, like food or illegal logging to finance their activities, we must check this.
And Festus Akiboyewa tweets, state governments fail to safeguard their forests in their domains. I read that again. Our state governments failed to safeguard the forests in their domains, which made it easy for criminals to invade and convert those forests for their criminal activities. Whatever happened to the forest guards? Flushing criminals out of our forest is a task that must be done.
Reggie Afiz Abidemi, it is good to keep forests because of natural resources that we are going to benefit from it. But security agencies need to do the needful to maintain security in our forests.
All right, Mutana Farouk tweets, the preservation of forests is germane, but managing them is more crucial to humans, animals, and societal sustenance and security. When the forests are well manned, they couldn't be the hiding domains for miscreants. I'd like to thank all of you for your tweets. And of course, one of the tweets I talked about the role of state governments there. I think it's a tweet from Festus Akimboyewa brings me to my next question. Gentlemen and lady, I remember sometime, in the heat of the agitations, by, of course, resource control, agitators in the South. There was a forest called Evil Forest. I'm sure most of us we've heard it. It used to be in Okochiri, that's in one of the local government areas. And when I think it was the government of Right Honorable Rotimi Chibika Amici, engaged them, that Evil Forest became a good forest in quote. I think that forest was converted into, I think it's a hospital. It became a site for hospital structure. And today, Evil Forest has given way to, a structure that is, people-friendly, that people are benefiting from. So, like Akimboyewa said, what is the role? Who is to be blamed? Who is in charge of the forest? Apart from the national parks, which we've all agreed that the federal government is in charge. But the other forests are within the state's domains. So, let me start with Engineer Akeju.
Thank you very much. Thank God, Nigeria is actually blessed because the forest resource itself, it cuts across all the states of Nigeria. If you look at the ecology of Nigeria, actually we have 6 ecologies, starting from the Sahel down to Sudan. Then from Sudan, you have Guinea savanna, and then you have a kind of transition, which is the derived one that transits into the tropical rainforest zone, where you have the rainforest. Then you have next layer, you have the swamp fresh, and then the mangrove.
Yes.
So you have all these. They have boundaries and they are within the states, but unfortunately, most of these things are actually neglected, and perhaps maybe there's also a cultural issue to it, because the perception in those days about forest is more of ritualistic kind of place, or a place where a lot of criminal things are actually happening there.
Did the sub-national governments realize the potentials in those forests?
That is exactly what I'm saying, So they tend to not really pay attention to forest. That is why I said initially that most of these highly densely forests are ungoverned, and they call them ungoverned space. So it just becomes something like no man's land. It becomes no man's land. And it's a very challenging work for people that are actually trained as forest guards to be able to cover all those areas, because forest area is very sparse. It's a lot of area. You could trek as much as 70, 80 kilometers within a forest zone.
All right, sir. Let's begin to talk about solutions now and what can be done.
In terms of solution, like we were talking about, yes, the forest guards are actually doing a wonderful job. So also the wildlife officers. But they are not equipped to be able to monitor to protect forests. In fact, by virtue of their training also, their training is not also adequate to actually monitor, to actually protect forests. Take, for instance, what we call jungle warfare. Not many of them are actually trained in jungle warfare, and it's very, very important. If you remember the history of Civil War, the terrain towards the mangrove area, penetrating into the east, they had to employ people who are knowledgeable in jungle warfare. And one of them is Adaka Boro, if you remember. Exactly.
All right, sir.
So they need training on jungle warfare to be able to equip themselves. And then you apply what we call the technology.
Okay.
Talk about remote sensing technology, it's there.
All right,
GIS
sir.
is there.
All right, sir. Let's bring in Tunde Akiola here, because he's the director of the Green Wall, which is National Agency. Exactly, National Agency for Green Wall. But I'm not going there. I want you to profess solutions. We have been able to establish the fact that there are ungoverned forests in this country, forests that are not security is not provided for. The parks that we have are already established parks where we have guards who are poorly equipped, poorly trained, as we have had this morning. Now, the way going forward, what is the way going forward in terms of providing security for the unmanned forest? Because this is where the kidnappers and their friends will stay. What can government do from the national and the subnational level? Should there be a collaboration between the national government and subnational government to see how those forests can be properly manned? And again, talk about the deployment of technology in all of this, because it is practically impossible for the forests to be properly manned or secured without technology.
Thank you very much. There are so many strategies that could be adopted to manage our forest. Number one, there must be collaboration between the federal government and the state, even the local governments, because the issue of forestry has to be holistically tackled. It's not limited to only one person or to only one government. There must be community participation, because many of these forests we are talking about, they are located in communities. And before, the community knows those people who come to those forests. And when they see bandits, when they see people who have evil intention, they can alert.
Especially strangers.
Yes, they can alert the police people or the security people. And the use of forest guards or the rangers have to be emphasized. Because right now, I was asking the question the other time that, what is the population of those forest guards we have? Do we have sufficient number? Meaning, because when we're talking also, we talk about forests, we also talk about plantations. If we even have rangers and forest guards in the natural forest reserves, what are the plantations we are establishing? Many of them don't have forest guards. And some states, it will be very, very funny to you that some states don't even have allocation to forest management or to forestry department or to forestry sectors. So you see that in some states, for over years, they have not been able to even establish any plantation, talking less of managing their forest reserves. So all those issues, all those forests have been left abandoned and allowing so many things to happen there. So there's need for proper, and like I said earlier also, extension awareness is very, very crucial. Because when people know the importance of forest, they know how to manage it well.
Okay. Let me bring Ibrahim Goni. We know that no matter the number of rangers or forest guards we have, the nature of our forests right now, well, we all know what it is, equipment and, being able to cover, the whole nature of the forest is practically impossible. Some governments have started clearing of bushes along highways. I know that was done some time ago along the Kogi axis. A particular state government is doing that right now along the Lagos-Benin axis. Is that a solution? That's one. What is the attitude, or what should the attitude of subnational governments be towards forest management?
Yes, thank you very much. Like you have rightly said, the clearing of bushes along the highways is not a solution. The solution is prioritizing forest management like we manage ANPC in this country. Today, if ANPC has a problem, the reaction from Nigerians will be so swift. But kill an elephant in a forest, nobody cares. It's bushmeat. So because of that neglect, state government have not recruited forest guard to monitor the forest.
Are you redundant?
Forest guard, I mean.
Yes. Are you redundant?
No, forest guard, not rangers.
Not
okay.
rangers.
Okay, forest guards.
State have not recruited forest guards and game guards to monitor their forest and game reserves. Go to most of the states now. The laws are there. Even though doctors said they are archaic, yes, let the State House of Assembly bring them from the archives, dust them, and review them. So that a situation where somebody kills an elephant is paying 5 naira is archaic. Such laws should be reviewed. There should be budgetary provision, like the other doctor said, for the forest. Then, importantly, like I've said, just like we give petrol eminence in this country, environment should be given
eminence. Okay. And system. Well, they have people who lose the here. Now, the chief of army staff, sometime last week, when he was addressing the soldiers at the headquarters, he said that he's giving a directive for Sambisa to be converted into parks. I'm looking at the possibility of that being done. I'm not asking you, Prof, is it a possibility to convert Sambisa Forest to a park that can be managed?
Unfortunately, we don't have time, but let me quickly touch so many issues. I just returned from Senegal, where we drove from Dakar to St. Louis. And I will tell you, because of the way the communities have been buy-in into the activities of the state, before we move 100 kilometers, we're stopped. Because a community member who saw the people in that vehicle as stranger had alerted the gendarme. So the communities had to be buying. But let me start from this. Like I stated earlier, in the past, 10, 20 years ago, we don't have places to even keep the forest guards sent to us to train. We have to be running a quick program. This is by local government, not even by state. Local government by local government in the past sent people to us to train. National parks send people to us to train so that they can identify what to look out for. Like my provost said in Jos, that is still there. We even now write on our own to remind them, but yet we don't get anybody to train. Some states are coming back on board. I know we have to go to Kogi State to help them review their law. I was also in Cross River 2 weeks ago to help them review their law. Ogun State had gone a bit ahead of others by even creating Ministry of Forestry. And that's why the only designated man and biosphere site in Nigeria is in Ogun State, Omo Reserve, where you can still find white elephant as I speak to you in their tents.
Okay. Prof, I need to pause you because we're almost running out of time. We need to get the perspective of Dr. Victoria Joshua in Jos. Beyond trained guards and rangers, what other sustainable solution, bearing in mind the need to, of course, restore security, of lives and of course, wildlife in our forest. What more can subnational governments do?
Well, there is need for networking so that the problem will be faced from all angles. And then there is need for awareness. Like you heard that the communities were able to give information. The communities here need to be educated on the importance of this thing, and they need to imbibe and accept that they need to work on the forest so that they can continue to benefit from the forest. So even the enabling environment for the people we train needs to be created, and it cannot be done by one tier of the government. It has to be everybody, both governmental agencies, non-governmental agencies, communities bordering the forests, community bordering the woodlands. We have to put our hands together and cooperate. The laws are there like we have had, but how do we enforce it? The laws are being broken. That's why the places are being depleted. So the grassroots has to understand and accept that there is need to stop wanton exploitation. There is need to implement planned exploitation so that we can sustain the forest. And we cannot do it, the government agencies cannot do it. Everybody's hands has to be on deck towards doing that. The Kenyan situation you cited, it gives them a lot of revenue. So they have been able to also train their locals to accept conservation policies. So we need to also do the same thing here to create a lot of awareness, acceptability, and determination to work together, to collaborate, to network, to face the issue of the forest. And then in terms of the security, there is need for training and equipping so that those criminals can be flushed out. We cannot deplete our forests to expose them. The forest gives covers to them, and it gives covers to our plants and animals, which is needed for continued sustenance. So there is need to collaborate to sustain the forest and flush out the criminals by the force it requires, not the little force that we have in forest guards.
All right, thank you very much, madam. You just opened up towards the end of the program, but we appreciate your contribution this morning from Jos Network Center. That's talking about Dr. Victoria Joshua, Provost, Federal College of Forestry. We have actually touched on a number of issues. Professor Shola Adepoju, Director General of the Forestry Reserve Institute of Nigeria, we thank you immensely for being here this morning. Ibrahim Goni is the Conservator General, National Park Service. It's been wonderful hearing from you. And of course, Dr. Olabaju Akeju, former Director of Rural Development and under the Minister of Agriculture. It's been wonderful having you. And of course, Tunde Akinola, Director the head of Forestation and Management Department, National Agency for the Green World. Thank you for coming this morning. Now,
thank you very much.
Let's go sporting.
12 days after Algeria triumphed at the CAF Africa Cup of Nations 2019, the continent